Welcome to the Business Wingman. I'm Steve Smith, and I'm joined here with my co-host Travis Smith, and we are a business-only podcast. So if you guys are listening to a lot of podcasts, I know you are, we're the only ones that focus on business development, how to be better as a business professional. What do you do if you're in over your head? These are the kind of things you want to know about, and these are the kind of things we bring to you every single week. We are also the one of the only, I've found out recently that we are not the only, but we are one of the only father-son podcast hosts out there on the internet. So we're particularly proud of that. And we hope you will join us every week. And the best way to do that is when you're on your podcast platform, whether it's iHeart or Apple or anyone that you choose to listen to all your stuff, we're there too. So just search for Business Wingman, hit the subscribe button, and you'll get everything, every new and innovative thing that we come up with every week, which we broadcast at 4 p.m. on Tuesdays. So Travis, I know today we're going to be talking about kind of a follow-up topic or a next phase topic based on last week's podcast. Because last week we were talking about how do you prepare to go into an interview where there's a promotion on the line? What do you do to make sure you get that promotion? You're prepared for the interview. You know, you're the best candidate and you get the nod. So let's say you get it. So this week we want to talk about how do you not screw up? How do you get into a promotable position and do it right while you're learning, while you're kind of getting established, so you don't end up deep sixing yourself and have everybody say, gee, did we make a mistake? So what do you think about that? What do you think people should be thinking about once they get over that, euphoria of, oh my God, I got promoted? What's next?
I think the biggest opportunity in that moment is to really start thinking about how you show up within the organization and what needs to change in order for you to really be successful in this new job. The kiss of death is when someone gets promoted, and let's say they went from an individual contributor, they're now into a management role, whether it's their first time being in management or it's just that's the transition. What you do not want to do is this old adage of, hey, what got me here is what will help me be successful moving forward, right? A lot of times what you find is we have to pivot. What we were doing as a hands-on contributor may support us in the new role, but what you'll find is there's a different set of skills that's really going to be required to help you continue move forward in management.
Right.
So that's what I know we're going to talk in fair part about today, just because developing those new skills and knowing where to go to get information and how to solve things, that's going to be crucial in a new job.
Right. Yes. And I can tell you, because many times throughout my career, I was in this exact situation. And you don't always do it right the first time, but at some point, either through your own experience or through watching other people's bad acts, you kind of figure out how do you start this thing. And the thing that I was kind of taught and it was suggested was that just because you've been promoted doesn't mean you automatically know everything now. And that can be a mindset issue that people that get promoted just waft into. All of a sudden, I have the stripes. I make the rules.
Right.
And so you kind of walk into that environment. Everybody's looking around you saying, okay, what happened here? So you really have to have a little bit of humility when you first start this thing.
Oh, 1,000%. And I would argue the people who right out the gates, especially if they're new in management, start throwing their weight around and, you just use the phrase of, I've got the stripes, I've got the title. What you actually find out when you can really dive into those people's behaviors and who they are as people is they have a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I have seen people do is it's almost kind of like their actions are, it's super bravado, it's super over the top to hide the fact that they don't really know what they're doing.
Yes.
Right. So what I have found is a much better strategy when you get into the job is just start learning, start meeting new people. Right. So if you've just got promoted into management for your first time, or maybe you're in a new department or a new business unit, that's a great time to really start wrapping your hands around who are your peers, who are the people above you. Right. And then perhaps most important, and I shouldn't have necessarily put this group as thirds, but who is your team? Right? Your ability to make those people feel great about the fact that they have a new boss will be paramount to your ability to be successful moving forward.
Yeah, and and obviously as you move forward in your own development in that role and you solidify who your team is and you understand who they are as individuals and what their individual roles are, I would argue that you probably should move in the direction of going outside your team, outside your department, to find out who the other people are in the organization who may not be directly under you, but
Yep.
who you need for your team to be successful. I mean, to me, the one that used to hit me in the face all the time, especially when I was back in more of a sales role, was salespeople and accounts receivable are
Yes.
always at loggerheads. Okay. And so one of the things I did almost immediately is I went and met with the head of the accounting department. And I said, look, I know this is an issue. Let's talk about how I can help you get what you need so we can get the credit to be able to sell more.
And wait, and the key that you just brought up there right now, which was so Yoda-esque of you, was how can I help you? How can
Right,
I make your job easier? I think the mistake a lot of people make is I'm the, the big woman, the big man on campus now.
right,
What are you going to do to help our department? That is the
right.
absolute wrong way to go into that. You used the word earlier, a little bit of humbleness, right?
Yes,
And you go into these conversations, and a little bit of empathy and just say, hey, I've noticed or I've heard that this has been a challenge. I can only appreciate what that does to you on a day-to-day basis.
right.
What can I do on my end to make your job easier?
Yes. And
And
that might include giving up something that is important to your end
sure.
result to kind of pay it forward and demonstrate to the other department that has experienced much friction over the years that you're serious. So
Yep.
yeah, so that kind of relationship building and credential validation, I think, is really important for new managers because if you let too much time go by and you let too many historical bad acts continue, then it's more difficult to be able to go in and create that new beginning when you've been in the job 6 or 8 months or almost a year, and now you're getting around to it.
Right. And that's why, so I've seen before where when you're getting into a new management job or you're starting a new role as a leader, I've seen people put together 30, 60, 90-day game plans. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is, those plans, I've seen multiple of them, almost always focus on interacting with peers, cross functional groups, and their team for the sole purpose of just building a tight relationship.
Hmm.
So the funny thing is, if you think about that, well, what's 90 days? 90 days is 3 months. So the investment up front is totally focused on people and resources and
Hmm.
making sure that those relationships, those the collaboration is tight. And then you're moving on to other things after that. That it may be processes within the department,
Right.
maybe figuring out your goals for the oncoming year, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, if your people, your team, the other departments, if that's not working together, you're just going to be up shit creek without a paddle for
Right. You're
the
going to be
foreseeable
fighting instant
future.
fires. Right.
Right.
Right. All right.
Right.
So here's one thing though I would in kind of going throughout that first 90 days we just talked about. One thing I would deviate with is probably within the first full week after you've taken care of whatever paperwork change up needs to happen in the company because you're now at a higher level and something, things change as a result of that. I would say sit down with your boss and say, look, I'm going to be meeting people. I'm going to be learning this role. I'm going to be trying to get things rolling. Tell me what's the most important thing on your plate that I need to be aware of. Because at the end of the day, if things get rocky, the only person that's probably going to defend you is the boss. And you've got to have a good relationship with them by understanding what's important to you that I don't screw up because you made the decision to put me in this role. I don't want people second guessing you later on.
Yeah. I mean, that goes to the old saying of like, how do I make you look great?
Right.
right? And
Right.
that goes back to, and this was one of the things that I knew eventually we would cover today, is managing up. Right?
Yeah.
That's a part of the job. As you get promoted and you move up the corporate ladder throughout your career, should that be your thing, inevitably you have to learn how to manage the people above you, which
Right.
sounds really strange if you think about it. Like,
Well,
wait, I have
it
to
does.
manage
Hey,
my
look, it does
boss?
sound
Like,
strange, but in the first company I was at, myself and a few other people I knew that were on somewhat management fast tracks were all making the same mistake. We were not managing up. We were not creating relationships with one or two levels above us because we all had this baked in attitude that if you do too much of that, you're brown nosing. And we
right.
didn't want to be brown nosers. So we basically shut the door on all that. And at one point, by one of the VPs of the Eastern Division who came and visited the office I was in, that was pointed out. And I was like, oh, I kind of forgot about that. I mean, you guys kind of want to know what we're all about. We should be spending time building rapport with you because
Yeah.
you guys hold the keys to all the resources. And so yeah, it did change my attitude. But prior to that, I wasn't thinking that way.
But I will admit, so it has to be an and. You can't go into a promotion or a new job and just totally be spending all of your time with all the executives, right?
Right.
It and there does need to be a balance. And I'm not going to throw some arbitrary number out there, but I would say that first and foremost, like I remember my boss telling me this, and I just didn't understand it right away, was his first team, his first priority were his peers. And I looked at that and I was like, wait, what? Like I thought I was your first priority, meaning your
Right.
subordinates.
Right.
And what he explained to me was that his peers, the other directors of operations
Hmm.
across the region, that was his first team. Because if they are not working together, the region's going to fall apart. So it
Mm.
doesn't matter how great an individual team is.
Right.
If that group collectively is not working together, it's going to sink the region.
Right.
And then he said, from there, I focus on my team. And I will openly admit, I was a little butthurt about that. I was like, what are you talking about? I thought we were the priority.
Sure, you
Uh,
have a position in line. Yours just isn't the first.
yeah. But the
Yeah.
reality was, once I got beyond that, it did make sense. At the end of the day, there's a pecking order with most things.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you treat people farther down the line or the ladder
Right.
differently, right? But I do think that it's smart to have a strategy in terms of how you engage with the different levels of groups, your
Hmm.
cross-functional teams, right? And you're setting expectations within those groups.
Right. So, what do you think are some of the rookie mistakes that a lot of entry level managers make just purely out of ignorance? They just don't know what they don't know, but they make assumptions, maybe because of past observations. What kind of things have you seen or possibly done that, will open people's eyes up to, oh, yeah, I shouldn't be doing that?
What this is strange. Can you see my notes? I
No.
swear, it's like you're beating me. Um, so,
That's kind of scary when you think about it.
well, it's kind of like when you're talking and then all of a sudden you look down at your cell phone and
Right.
it's putting ads in front of you of stuff that you've never searched.
Right.
It's like that weird Big Brother stuff.
Right.
But
It's picking up on your thoughts. Right.
right. Anyways, I digress. So one of the things that I see people make mistakes with is they're not thinking big enough.
Mm.
They get into a job. Let's say they're now into management and they're overseeing a kind of a smaller, a mid-sized team
Hmm.
within a business unit or a department. And all they're doing, they're so myopically focused. They're so focused on their team and the activities that are going on within the team. They don't see the bigger picture, which is how that team's work is impacting the rest of the organization
Right.
and how that team is behaving. Does that align with the organization's goals?
Right.
That's a huge missed opportunity and, quite frankly, mistake.
Yeah. And depending on how that person got into that role, maybe they replaced somebody who wasn't doing the job. That could have been one of the reasons. So it's really important to be able to identify that early so you don't end up walking down the same road that the person that got fired
Right.
walked down. Now,
Yeah.
here's one thing that I see. that I find it's a little comical, but it's a little distressing at the same time. You get promoted into this role, and I'm assuming that you're coming from the same company, maybe even the same department. You've just now been kind of plucked to move up and run a team that you might have been a part of before. So the minute you get into that role, all of a sudden you make this assumption that everybody around you can't really do their job, that you have to tell them how to do it.
Yes.
And that, I mean, that can be a real game changer in terms of whether people are going to acknowledge your role and take your direction, or whether they're going to fight you because they've been instantly dissed over everything that they've been able to accomplish since before you got there.
Yeah. I mean, look, you have to assess people's capabilities, right? I mean,
Yes.
I would never recommend somebody going into a new job and immediately within that first week, just horse trading people out the door, you know, terming people left and right.
Right.
That is not going to go over well.
Right.
So there is a certain amount of strategy in just kind of bigger picture thinking that has to go into that. But that being said, if you're not managing accordingly or dealing with problems within the group, or letting people just do their job. I was trying to remember the Steve Jobs quote. Is something like, "You don't hire great people to then tell them how to do their job," right?
Or
Something
to
to
do
that
the
effect.
job for them. Yes.
Correct. So again, the assumption we're making here is that you have the right team in place and they all know what they're doing
Right.
for the most part. If that's the case, your job is to simply make their jobs easier, block and tackling up front so that your team can then do the job on the back end.
Yes.
That's in the most simplest form. That's what your responsibility is.
Yes.
And then when a mistake comes up, because it will, your job is to take the responsibility for it and protect your team. But when something great comes up, you're supposed to give the recognition. So, and look, I'm not the first person to say this. I mean, leadership is a lonely place at times.
Oh, yeah.
But the people who do it the best, they cover those things that I just mentioned. I think that's really important. You got to get out of the way at times and give people autonomy.
Yeah. One of the other things I see that gets done more from being inferred is that people move into these management roles, and they believe that based on the fact that they got tapped for the job and they now have an elevated title, that people should be just automatically following them. And just because the company said, yeah, we think you're the right person for this role, doesn't mean you don't have to build some kind of credibility with the people that you now oversee. And that's normal. People are going to sit back and wait to see who you are after, a couple of weeks has gone by, who's really showing up here, and how do you work, so that I can figure out if I want to follow you or if it's going to be an unpleasant experience.
So I had an experience with a past boss, and he did something that initially I totally took incorrectly. And what it was, and this kind of is in reference to what you're sharing here about, behaviors and how you show up. And he would come in the morning and shake everybody's hand in the office before he went into his own office. So, there was like 40 people in the office. This is no small feat. Whereas you've told stories even before. I'm trying to remember the company it was that you worked at. The senior most person at the facility would basically walk into the facility, not talk to anybody, go straight to their office and close the door. Right. That type of behavior is going to speak volumes in a negative way.
Right.
Versus treating people like people and actually going out of your way to care a little bit, to acknowledge them and just say good morning.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be anything more than that in that moment. Right.
Right. No, I'm glad you reminded me. You remembered that story, because I actually, in a training seminar I put on yesterday, I told that story to kind of, to accentuate the fact that relationships constantly need to be built and maintained. And if you have a habit of just focusing on your duties to the detriment of everybody around you, who collectively is what allows you to be successful in your role, then, at some point people are going to just completely disconnect from what you're saying because they don't know you. They know you don't care about them because you've never
Right.
talked to them. And so that's where all of a sudden, people at the top start getting replaced because they've never earned the respect and the loyalty of the ranks below them.
Well, you just use the word right there. It's trust is not given, it's earned.
Yes. Yeah.
People may do what you say out of fear, but that's only going to last so long.
Right.
If you really want people to run through a brick wall, to see the bigger picture, to when no one's looking to do the right thing and go above and beyond, they do that at the end of the day because they feel like they're a part of something bigger and that what they're doing actually makes a difference.
Right.
You can only get there if those people, your team, feels like you respect them and they trust you.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So here, let me throw this out because this, I can imagine for a lot of people listening, they're saying, okay, this is great if you're being promoted from within. What if you take a promotion, but you're leaving the company you've been with to go to a new company? What differences are there in that kind of a scenario where you're taking an elevated role? Maybe you go from a department supervisor to a division manager, and the opportunity was there. Some company came and plucked you out. You got a little reputation in the market. They decided to try to upgrade their talent, and they went outside to get it, and you were the one. So now you're working for another company in an elevated role. What differences should people be thinking about or kind of considering in that kind of a situation?
So I still think you start off the way you brought up earlier, right? It's, you're sitting down with your boss in the first week. Here's what my plan is. The next couple months, it's developing relationships with the team and so forth. That being said, if you're walking into a new company, it is so crucial that you learn the company systems, how the company communicates, and the product service, especially if you're coming into that business and you don't have a ton of experience with whatever that product or service is.
Yes.
Your job is to become an expert as quickly as you humanly can. That doesn't mean you need to know every little nuance of every little piece, but you need to understand the inner workings. That way you can help your team, help your cross-functional partners, whatever the heck it may be, and work within the system.
Mm-hmm.
If you're constantly having to go to other people 6 months, a year down the road to have them facilitate something because you haven't learned how to use the ERP system,
Right.
that's your bad. That's a missed opportunity. And I'm not saying you're going to get fired over that, but what I will say is you'll develop a reputation for someone who's not adaptable,
Yes.
which may cause you a promotion down the road.
Yes. And that is a really good point right there, because when it comes to adapting goes both ways. Sometimes people walk into new jobs, new companies, and depending on what they know about that company and why they were specifically brought in, sometimes there's this mindset that says, I'm here to upgrade you guys. You need to adapt to me. And even though that ultimately might be what's necessary, you can't start that way. You've got to go in and adapt to them first.
Correct.
And understand how their system works, whether it's, whether it's an effective system or it's dysfunctional. And you need to do that first and gain their trust before you start injecting new things that either they've never heard about or never done and expecting them to follow that.
100%. And, don't go in and try to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
One of the best things I think somebody can do when they're new on the job, new company, maybe it's a new product, new service, sit down with your own team and get their feedback.
Right.
This is not like a freaking magic show. Like you don't need to like try to figure out these details if it's behind some sort of a cloak.
Right.
Sit down with your own team and get them engaged.
Right.
Get their feedback. What I think what you'll find is they'll be excited to be involved, right? If you do it in the right manner, that would be where I would start, is just try to get a lay of the land from as many people as possible without having to try to reinvent the wheel.
Yes. And I'll give you a very, very short example of where that went wrong at a level I've never seen before. The third company that I was with was bought out by a major competitor. Okay. It was in the household cleaning business in retail. And throughout the process of them acquiring us, their corporate headquarters, the people at the very, very top, made the decision that this new combined company needed new leadership. So they brought in an executive actually from the very first company that I went to work for, General Mills. They brought this guy in to be the CEO of this new combined company. And he came in with such bravado and such a change orientation that within a week they had rescinded the offer.
Wait, what?
Yes.
The guy actually started was
They made the job offer. He was in the middle of moving his family to the headquarters of this new company. And the stuff he was talking about was so radical in nature that the people at the company that had acquired us just got, they got freaked out over it. There's no way we can bring somebody in like this and have him completely dismantle everything we've done to that degree. So they rescinded the offer. Within a week, he was out. And
wow.
I always remember that. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there's a great example of be careful of what you tell people you're going to do too early in the game, because
Well,
that just killed it.
I think what I take away from that situation, obviously I wasn't there, but is if you try to do too much too quick
Right.
and it's too radical, you just inevitably are going to have a huge portion of the company, your department, your team, whoever it is, push back on that.
Right.
I really am a big proponent of, if change has to be made, sometimes you can't get away with this, but I think the majority of the time you can get away with small incremental change that has a strategy behind it. You're communicating about it. But if you come in and just start ripping the Band-Aid off in every facet of the business,
Right. Right.
I think most people are probably not going to deal with that well.
Well, no, they're going to push back, because even though they might agree that something better needs to be done, when you go that deep, that fast, you're now attacking what they have worked on, even though it wasn't the best. They're now feeling like utter failures because you're tearing everything up. And people are going to fight that, even though in the back of their minds, they know, yeah, we need to change. We just don't need to change that radically that fast.
And that's the key. It's like, if you're coming in that kind of a leadership role, senior executive leadership, you've got to make sure the company's bought in.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing worse than trying to put out new strategy, you have new goals and whatnot, and they might be aggressive and it might be a big pivot or shift from what the company had done before.
Right.
To have it fall flat on its face because people aren't bought in, and then it just becomes a flavor of the month.
Well, and since then, I have worked with other executives in different companies that have had that, what I call the authoritarian leadership style. Here, I know what we need to do. We're going to go this way. You just need to get in line and follow. And for a whole host of business environments today, that just doesn't work anymore, because people want the opportunity to buy in on their own terms. They want to be able to have a say in how this thing goes down and what they're going to do along the way. And if you're good at capturing that, you can get their hearts and minds fairly quickly and probably long-term be in a better situation. But if you don't, if you just do a bum rush on them, they will fight you. And eventually they know that there's more of them than you.
Well, and your comment about people just won't stand for that. I mean, the reality is this idea of people working for companies for 15, 20, 30 years, it's their entire career.
Right.
I know it still happens today, and I actually know a couple of people, but that is a tiny, tiny minority of the workforce. Most people today, I see it 2 years, kind of that like 18-month to maybe 2.5 year, kind of in that time period, they're out the door.
Right.
So if you want to keep great people and you're new in your job, the best way to do is just invest in them.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you've got to be shelling a ton of money at people, or it just means you have to freaking care.
Yeah. If you invest a little time and invest your focus, that's the equivalent of shoveling money in the department for whatever. Because people, you're right, people just want to know that the person I work for genuinely cares about me being my best when I'm on the job. And I think if you can communicate that, regardless if you're at the top of the pile or if you're coming in at a midpoint, either upward through the organization or from the outside in, that's the very first thing you got to establish. Is you have to know them, you have to understand what their challenges are, and you have to be a partner in their success. And if they know that, they'll be willing to put in the time and the effort to make you successful.
Oh, coin that right there. That's my takeaway from the discussion today.
Right.
If you're new in your job, you got to be a partner to their success. Damn, I'm going to go get that trademark. That was beautiful.
Look, check GoDaddy. There might be a URL for that. All right. We are at the tail end of this show. And again, we really, when we put this information out, we talk about, our own experiences and the things that we've run into. We're really trying to get you guys to understand that these are best practices. These are well worn, and a lot of people have done these. And if you're new in your role, take advantage of listening and learning and looking around and saying, where else am I seeing this happen? Because it can save you massive amounts of heartache and possibly a step back sometimes if somebody puts you in a role they think you're ready for and you prove to them that you're not. Now you got to retrace your steps, and nobody wants to go through that, but a lot of people do. So hopefully you got something really good out of today's episode, and you can keep from making those career limiting moves. Thanks for being with us today, folks. Travis, this was a really good follow-up to last week's podcast. So thanks for bringing it forward. And as always, we will be back to you guys next week, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, with a brand new topic and some sage advice. Take care. Have a great week. See you later.